Okay, so let's see. It looks like you've been watching some of the videos I've been putting out from your technique that
Yeah.
I saw on the videos. Great. And since I was able to preview some of the videos,
Yeah.
because you sent me way more than I needed. So I want to,
Okay.
I just want to pin down, what are maybe the top two or three things that you really feel you want help with your horse?
Okay. So the long lining one, that's the first time I've ever done that. So I wanted to know I was doing, if she needed that, if I was doing it correctly, and where to go with that. Um, and yeah, maybe the lunging, how did you think that was? And how just general on the riding.
Okay.
So any of the ride, they're pretty close to videoed close together within probably 2 weeks of each other, all the videos. So they're pretty where we are now.
Okay. And then as we go over your work, what would you say? What's your horse's name?
Queenie.
Queenie. I love it.
Yeah.
So, what are the main things you would like to address between you and Queenie? Do you find it's more on the behavioral side of things or more on the balance and movement side of things?
Balance and movement,
Okay.
definitely. She's willing and obedient. So I've got no behavioural problems as such.
Yeah.
Only that she tries to. It's all a bit quick with her, so it's and quite anxious with her as well. So if I ask her to do something, it's like okay, but really quick, and she doesn't. She just wants to please, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Uh, and contact, I'm finding with bit contact, she's not liking it as much. Is well, not
Yeah.
that I would like, but just where to go with it, really. So
So that's what, let me set up the screen share. I've got all your videos kind of pulled up on different tabs. And so we can kind of bounce back and forth between each video. Can you see
yeah,
let me move it around. Whoops. There we go.
yeah,
Okay, so let me go to the lunging video. I think that was first.
yeah.
And that was the only place I saw any anxiety too,
Okay.
was that her little bit of sort of jumping around, being a little distracted. Is that
Yeah.
normal when you start?
So there was a lot going on that day, I think, and you can see the stables are there, and then we got stables this side, so she does get easily distracted with what's going on.
Oops, and I had played through some of this already. Let me take it back. So that's a little bit atypical of her to kind of
Yeah,
look around and get worried. Okay.
yeah,
And
yeah, especially on the lunge, actually. Not, I've never, touch wood, had any of that while I've been on her.
okay. Yeah. So, yeah, because that was just the first video I sort of looked through where let me
Yeah,
make it bigger.
people pop out from behind the stables, and she's kind of like, oh, and off she goes.
Yeah. So I would say, I mean, just from the little bit of video I saw, that if she is under pressure, her MO would be more on the flighty side of the scale rather than the fight side.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, and you do a beautiful job with her, kind of like bringing her closer, walking with her, restarting. Everything you do on the lunge is great. The only thing I would suggest with lunging is kind of a basic principle that we tend to think going faster is going to spend more energy and calm them down.
Yeah.
And what I find is a long walk, and when we allow downward transitions, that has a calming effect on the energy. And when we ask for upward transitions and we're increasing speed, that can have an excitement energy.
Yeah.
So on a day like this, one of the strategies you could play with, or if she's, being triggered for whatever reason, is leave her at the walk. And
Yeah.
if she chooses to go faster than the walk, I would just let her go if she's not going to pull the lead line out of your hand.
Yeah.
So as long as it sort of looks safe and manageable, I tend to let anxious horses express their anxiety through the speed and just wait for them to come back to the walk.
Okay.
And the time at the walk, or when we allow, like you do in the video, you allow her to make the downward transitions and then you ask for the upward. That's the best way to do it, because the greatest benefit you get on the lunge line is through transitions more than
Yeah.
anything else. And so if you think of if she's a little bit defensive or fearful, then the walking time facilitates the calmness, and the trotting time, if she trots or canters, that's on her, but you're not going to ask for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she really starts to let go of her neck at the walk. And I was glad you included a lunging video, because without support, you sort of see how the horse chooses to move regarding their posture
Yeah.
and balance. And I would say she's a little bit stuck in the posture of extension, I call it, which is just the back going down, the neck shortening, coming up. And when she starts to, like, I wouldn't say the lateral balance is her bigger issue. I would say it's more to do with her ability to control her body weight and
Right. Yeah.
manage her body weight without that shortening of the top line muscles.
Yeah.
So at the walk and even in the trot, walk and trot, she'll sort of find, like, at the walk it's a little slower. At the trot, there when she has a little bit of speed going, the momentum is acting as a stabilizer,
Yeah.
right? So the fact that she chooses to really lengthen the top line muscles, and of course she falls into the posture of long and low, but
Yeah.
that's always to me the next logical step from the posture of extension.
Yeah.
So once they're in long and low, the only benefit of that posture is that they're no longer actively creating a downward force through the spine. It's not as lifted as it needs to be for balance, but it's no longer going the downward direction,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
that's what I would encourage with her. So, like here, where she's just starting to find it at the walk, I think if she had more time, she would do better finding it at the walk. The reason
Okay.
she finds it easier at the trot, that tells me something important, is that she's using speed as a little bit of a stabilizing force, and that's going to feed the anxiety.
Right.
So
Okay.
instead of actually engaging the hind legs, she can let go of that muscle shortening and the downward force through her spine when she has a little more speed, rather than more so at the walk.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Actually, it I can see where you're what she's doing by what you're saying, because the walk is, and that's why I ask for the trot a lot, because she does go down in the trot easier than the walk. So that was my way of thinking. I'm doing that to help her, but
Yes.
by you explaining that,
Yes.
it kind of it does, but it doesn't. Yeah.
And I would say on the lunge line, what you're doing with the walk trot transitions very quietly, I would wait maybe a little longer. to see if she could lengthen the neck further in the walk, and
Yeah.
then ask for your transition in a moment that she's quite long and low. You'll
Yeah.
get the maximum benefit out of the transition. You also are going to have to ask pretty gently with the whip, and it may take a lot of repetition before she can do the upward without shortening her neck.
Yeah.
She does do the downward with a little bit more length. And so
Yeah.
that's why the walk, trot, if she's not anxious, if she's calm, then walk, trot, walk, trot, walk, trot, kind of looking for, like she shortens her neck a little bit in the downward, but not as much as during the upward.
Yeah. Definitely.
So she's still mostly habituated, whether it was the lunging or the riding, she's still more prevalent in the posture of extension with the back down and the head up.
Yeah.
And what that means, the reason she's having a hard time changing that posture is the chain of events. When the spine pushes downward, the neck goes up because actually even the cervical spine is pushing downward. And we can see that sort of big lump at the base of the neck when they lift their head up. That's the cervical spine.
Yeah.
And when the spine's going that direction, it has a counter rotation effect on the pelvis and hip joint. So it disengages the hindquarter, placing the hind legs too far behind the torso for them to effectively what we call engagement, which is actually also the braking use of the hindquarter,
Right.
right? And so the braking mechanism in her body is weak. And that's why she does a little better when she increases pushing,
Yeah.
but and it's why she has a hard time um, lengthening in the neck in the walk. And you can
Right.
kind of see like she's really going to need to put her nose in the dirt. And when you see her really slow down, that's when she's starting to use the braking mechanism, which is the use of the back muscles, hindquarter muscles, and it's the forward placement of the hind leg. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, in other words, there's a braking and pushing phase of every stride, and there's a braking and pushing use of the back and hindquarter muscles. It gets kind of confusing.
Yeah.
So, it's the same terminology to describe two different events. And so that's why when she does lengthen the muscles of the top line, she speeds up a little bit, telling us that the braking mechanism is weak. So she
Yeah.
goes a little faster and a little
Yeah.
faster, seeking stability.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So and let me just pause this where I need to. If we look at maybe just well, I'll wait until she walks. So as she's sort of chugging around, see if I can find a good moment to just show the phases of the leg stride. Okay, so here, the right hind leg is in the beginning of the braking phase. So as soon as the hoof lands,
Yeah.
until it hits peak vertical, it's in a resistant phase of the stride. So we all know that the closer the hind feet are coming to the center of the body, that's what we call engagement of the hindquarter.
Yeah.
Engagement is furthered primarily through the braking use of the body, not the pushing.
Okay.
And that's
Didn't know that.
that is the opposite of what the still major belief is out there in dressage. Because we sort of
Yeah.
think the faster they go, the more they lift.
Yeah.
And I'm just breaking this down for you because once we understand that the way the spine lifts into more and more and more flexion is a balanced use in opposing directions of force through the back muscles. That's directly related to the leg kinematics. So if we watch, here's the leg placement in the braking phase, and the opposite hind leg is at the end of the pushing phase.
Yeah.
right? So the left hind hoof is about to come off the ground and swing forward,
Yeah.
right? So I, oh shoot, I can't do this on the YouTube videos. I can, on some videos, I can do the slow-mo stride by stride, but
Okay.
this one jumps in 5-second increments.
Okay.
So, um, so if I just keep pausing, and
Yeah.
we won't even talk about the front legs just yet. We have
Okay.
now the left hind is just coming forward ready to land. That's the beginning of the braking phase. And the right hind is almost at the end of the pushing phase.
Yeah.
So this kind of explains to you why she's going faster, is she's less comfortable in the braking phase. And that is a direct result of a habitual posture of extension with the back down, the neck up, right? So she goes faster and faster, like the timing of the pushing phase is sort of what's keeping her stable, feeling stable, because she's not as comfortable bringing the hind legs up.
Yeah.
So same thing there. So this is in the middle stage of the braking phase, and she just brought her hoof off the ground. So she's not quite at peak vertical as this hoof is coming off the ground. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah.
So the way to address this, let me see if I can find one more place. Yeah, like she's getting underneath herself as best she can,
Yeah.
but like here, her peak vertical is a little bit behind the vertical, or it's the beginning of the pushing phase,
Yeah.
right? So if I play it in real time, if you just watch the hind legs and the pelvis, she the legs seem to be more often behind the torso than up and under. When she
Yeah.
lengthens her neck and puts her nose on the ground, that leg kinematic can change a little bit. The way you know she's using the braking use of her back and hindquarter muscles would be when she slows down her paces a tiny bit. So it would be
Okay.
a little bit of a slower walk for her to be able to not have to shorten her neck, for her to stay in long and low for the
Yeah.
entire lap of the circle, walk or trot. She
Yeah.
would have to start engaging a little more and using the braking use of her back muscles. So braking is just like the brakes in our car. They use the braking mechanism of the back and hindquarters to control their body weight.
Yeah.
So as they push and create a pushing force, it's the braking use that controls the pushing force.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah.
If they're not strong in pushing, it's lethargic movement typically.
Yeah.
But if they're not strong in braking, it's typically a little bit of a rushy movement.
Yeah. And that's what I find with her. That's what I said about the almost wanting to please and going too fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what she's doing to find stability,
Right. Okay.
right? So she's using a little bit of momentum to find her stability, but
Yeah.
it's not a truly useful stabilizing force because you have to keep going faster. So
Yeah.
it skates on the edge of control, right? And what that's telling us is that the more often she's in this posture of shortening her neck, the more often it's encouraging the pushing phase of the hind leg, putting the
Yeah.
hind legs farther and farther behind as a habit. So
Yeah.
the first thing I would look for is whether you're doing the lunging or the long reins on the ground or even under saddle. We're going to look at all the different ways that we could help her habituate the posture of long and low, number one.
Yeah.
And that should help her slow down and get more control over her movement.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move to, I think, Was it the second video where you're doing long reins or the third video?
Third, fourth, fourth.
It was the fourth. Oh, with a different date on it. That's what it was.
Yeah, I didn't actually write number 4 on that one. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think too, I agree with you 100% that you really have zero behavioral issue, fear issues. Um, I look at her more like the anxiety and the little bit of rushing has more to do with her physical balance or sense of inner stability than anything else.
Yeah.
So I immediately liked, and this is literally your first long range session.
Yeah.
You did amazingly well. This is the hardest groundwork technique that I teach. And you really nailed it. You really got the whole inside rein staying the same length and just adjusting the outside rein. You did a beautiful job. And so on the long reins, where she over curls her neck a little bit
Yeah.
more, right? That's the exact same problem as the high headed. It's just a
Right.
different version of her falling forward and trying to
Yeah.
hold through the neck.
Okay.
Okay, so all it tells you is on the lunge line, every time she's shortening that neck upward, she fell forward and became unstable. And that's the instinctual posture to regain stability. But
Yeah.
it works against us long term. When you have her on the long reins, there's times like that where her neck is authentically long, and
Yeah.
then she'll kind of over curl it. She'll elevate it a little
That's
bit,
what.
but over curl it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All that tells you is she's struggling with not with controlling her body weight, falling
Okay.
forward. I
Yeah.
like that you did it in the halter because if they have a
Yeah.
tendency to over curl the neck, you're much better off without the bit in their mouth to start with.
Yeah.
So I would say, even if she is a bit anxious, I would put her on the long lines way more often than I would do lunging.
Okay. I was just concerned about the over, but when I seen her over kind of going in, I was a bit concerned about that. So that's great that
It's
you
basically
explained that.
so the way the long reins work is when you're doing long reins on a circle while you're standing still, the circle itself is encouraging more braking. It's
Yeah.
encouraging the
Okay.
hind legs to come up deeper. It's encouraging them to find a way to slow down.
Yeah.
What you're actually doing between the two reins is you're stabilizing the function of rotation, which is the twisting motion of the spine. But in a horse, it feels like rocking.
Yeah.
Okay, so the side effect of the spine pushing downward, which is really her main issue, is that every time the spine pushes downward, it also goes into what's called hyperrotation. So it destabilizes the whole axial skeleton because every time the spine is pushing down, you're disengaging the hindquarters, but you're also creating a side to side rocking feeling in the saddle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like a shaking side to side. That's hyperrotation, right? That's a known dynamic going to happen every time the spine pushes downward. It's
Okay.
also going to create hyperrotation. So over time, what happens is the whole pelvis sort of rocks and the back
And
sort
you
of
rock with it.
rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's making it harder for her to engage the hindquarter.
Yeah.
So what you're feeling through the inside rein is when her torso is either rocking too far in on the circle, you're going to have slack on the inside rein.
Yeah.
Or if she's rocking to the outside of the circle, she's going to pull on the inside rein.
Yeah.
So the static rein length is helping you, and you see how much it's changing, right?
Yeah.
So that's telling you how much her torso is rocking side to side on the circle.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and The other thing about the long reins that took years for me to explain is that they literally support the changes in her body from the pelvis first, then forward.
Okay.
So the very first thing that the long reins will do is if the pelvis is unstable, you may have to sort of use the outside rein to the point that her neck bends to the outside.
Yeah.
That all that tells you, like there,
Yeah.
right there, you followed the feel of the inside rein to its
Yeah.
complete straightness, and that put her head to the outside.
Yeah.
All that means is she doesn't feel very stable on her own hindquarter.
Right.
That's all that means. You're
Okay.
still, but by putting the head to the outside, it's sort of the unintended side effect of keeping the pelvis level on the circle,
Yeah.
right? So it's preventing the body weight from tipping in, which is a rotation issue, at the expense of a little bit of outside bend,
Yeah.
right? And that's why she also over curls the neck, is because she's not stable enough through the hindquarters. She still wants to hold in her neck muscles for stability, whether it's shortening upward, which she can do on the lunge line, or
Yeah.
over curling because the long reins are not allowing her to get her neck upward.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
That
it
makes
just
perfect sense.
indicates to you that she's heavy on her front legs, that her hindquarter is not, and back muscles are not controlling her body weight yet, right? So
Yeah.
the I would do quite a bit of this, and I think you'll feel the difference when you ride, even if it
Yeah.
kind of looks terrible,
Yeah.
right? And the place to put your eyeballs when you're long reining is right here on the top of the pelvis.
Okay.
If you watch behind the saddle to the tail, what you're
Yeah.
feeling in your hands will make a lot more sense.
Okay.
When you watch the head and neck, which we all tend to do, it's confusing to what you're feeling because it's almost like the opposite. How can this be?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because you would think a horse with their head to the outside should be increasing the force on the inside rein, but it
Yeah.
doesn't. And that's what
Yeah.
it's like with her head straight, the slack on the inside rein tells you her body weight is falling in on the
Yeah.
inside front leg.
Yeah.
So you're correcting it when you pull on the outside rein, even if it
Yeah.
puts her head to the outside.
Yeah.
It's like a circle with a bend to the outside.
Yeah.
She gets very concentrated. Her ears are half out. She's very calm. She's kind of liking this. She's struggling with it physically because you're going right to the heart of her issue.
Yeah.
You're saying, don't rock your pelvis side to side and don't push too much. Find the balance between the braking and the pushing and a level pelvis on a circle.
Brilliant. That makes so much sense. I'm
Yeah.
glad I've done this video now because I've seen your videos when you've done it for other people.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, I'll try it and see. I didn't like what I saw because of the outside bend and the over bending, but it makes sense when you, you explain it.
Yeah. And usually you will feel, I would maybe recommend do the long range just at the walk as a warm up before you ride and just give
Yeah.
it, 10 minutes each way. You can do
Yeah.
longer if you have time.
Yeah.
Um, she will come to a place where instead of rushing, right now, because of the rushing, she's nicely forward on the long reins.
Yeah.
She will sort of, as she starts to really authentically change the use of her hindquarters, she'll go through a period where she stops a lot.
Okay.
And if that happens, just go closer to her, make a shorter inside rein, and walk with her a little bit.
Okay.
It's not as precise a circle, but it'll help her get through that phase. They go from rushing to not going forward. They all do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's perfectly normal. It'll be a sign of progress when she loses forward.
Okay.
And then you'll have, then your issue will be getting her to go forward, but that won't
Okay.
be too difficult. But that's perfectly normal. But from what we looked at on the lunge line to even looking at what she's doing on the long reins, you see she's getting like there's her peak vertical is more underneath her pelvis as
Right.
she's
Yeah.
shifting between braking and pushing. That's going to help her stay out of extension. She won't be stable at first, which is why
Right.
the head goes up and down on the lunge line, is because as
Yeah.
soon as she actually lets go of that shortening of the top line, she can't hold it because her hind end isn't supporting her stability.
Yeah.
So that's what the long reins on the circle will absolutely address that head on, right?
Perfect.
So she's going to struggle. The front end is going to look crazy weird. She's going to do all kinds of things with her neck until she starts to feel more stable on the hindquarters. And so
Yeah.
she'll stop more frequently, but what you'll see through the neck is a true straight line from the withers down to the pole. There won't be any
Right.
curling in the neck, right? And she'll start to hold that. When they hold the long and low, the long reins get a little trickier to manage. So that would be another reason to just work closer to her.
Right.
You don't
Okay.
necessarily have to make the circle tighter. I have a few lessons I just posted on doing tighter circles on the long reins, but I wouldn't do that with her just yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Is this size circle that I done
Yeah.
enough? Yeah.
You want to kind of balance the size of the circle with the amount of forward that the horse is offering,
Okay.
right? And then I started this work. It was my go-to for horses that were super anxious and could never slow down. And this exercise worked absolutely the best on those horses.
Right.
For the horses that don't start with a lot of forward energy, it's a bit of a tougher groundwork exercise, but it still has the same benefits.
Yeah.
So what I learned is with the horses, if as long as you have self-propelled forward on this size circle, then it's a good size circle,
Yeah.
right? And if she loses forward, you can just walk around, make the circle less precise and walk with
Yeah.
her.
Walk
And,
with
and
her. Yeah.
that should encourage the forward.
Yeah.
But her changing her neck will be the very last piece of her
Yeah.
working through finding stability through the pelvis, the sacrum, the lumbar, then maybe a little bit the upper thoracic. But I find typically once the pelvis is more stable in a level use on the circle, they straighten their own neck out.
Yeah.
So what will happen is she just won't put as much slack in the rein. She'll start to carry the neck straighter, but the rein won't be slack. Right now,
Yeah.
as soon as her neck is straight, the rein is slack.
Yeah.
Right. So that just tells you she's not actually balancing through the hindquarters. She's still trying to balance on the front end.
On the front end. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So let me move on. And then I actually wanted to go to your first riding video. I thought you did a brilliant job. Let me take it back sort of towards the beginning. I really liked and I like watching people's warm up because that really shows me where the horse is starting and
Yeah.
what's coming up. So the first thing I would suggest for your riding is maybe about the size of your lunging circle. I would take away the straight lines when you ride. I would do
Okay.
more turns or more circles. And
Yeah.
in your warm up, that's exactly what you're doing. And I'm thinking maybe just to get her attention on you, you were throwing in more turns.
Yeah.
But in the first part of your ride, where you're kind of staying where this shed is towards this end of the arena,
Yeah.
you're, and then later in your riding videos, you're kind of using the whole
The whole of the arena.
arena.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where she doesn't do as well as when you use a smaller portion of the arena.
Okay.
Because once she's on a straight line, even with you on her, the sort of neck up, down is telling you that once she lengthens the muscles of the top line, she falls forward and she feels unstable,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? What I love is that you really can keep the neck straight. You stay pretty level, and she looks really wide, like
Yeah.
really wide. And I don't know,
I'm at full capacity with her.
yes, yes.
Mm.
So you're in a good position. Like if we just take a moment to look at you, you've got a pretty good vertical position. You have a tendency to be a hair heavy in the seat.
Yeah. Okay.
And what you could do is maybe if you lengthen your stirrups one hole, but I don't know because this width may be a factor. But if you could come a tiny bit more onto the inner upper thigh by just rocking forward. So coming off your glutes a little bit and kind of using your butt muscles to just come a hair more forward onto your seat bones,
Yeah.
that would put your leg a tiny bit more underneath you. So instead of feeling the saddle more with the lower thigh, you would feel the saddle more with the upper thigh.
Okay. Like
And
your upper inner thigh.
yes, and it's not a matter of
Yeah.
adjusting the legs, it's a matter of bringing your torso a hair more forward.
Yeah.
Right. And if you
Okay.
kind of play with that, as if you stay where you are first and then play with rocking almost too far
Okay.
forward, you'll feel where the pressure or the contact on your legs changes from the lower thigh to the upper thigh.
Okay.
And at first, it might feel way too far forward for you. So you'll have to kind of play with that a little bit. But if you play with kind of staying straight, but just rocking almost like you're rocking towards a 2 point position,
Okay. Yeah.
right? There'll be a place where you feel too far forward, but your lower thigh will lose a little contact and your upper thigh will gain more contact.
Okay. Yeah. I get
Okay.
that.
And
Yeah.
that's the only thing I would suggest with your riding. And because the downward force of the spine creates hyperrotation, you have a lot of this side to side movement.
Yeah.
And if you're a tiny bit more forward where your upper inner thigh has more contact, you would be able to resist that a little better.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in the video, like have you seen some of the videos where I've talked about the levelness of the back or the rider?
Yes. Where they send you either left or right. Is that what
Yes.
you mean? Yeah.
Yes. So I wanted to go here. So you keep your seat pretty level. This leg tends to get a little bit tight. And I would
Right.
have expected that she would put you more to the left, but in this moment, I think she's putting you a more to the right. So when you get a tiny bit more forward and you feel the inner thigh, I think you'll feel more clearly what she's doing with her back under your seat bones this way,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I definitely feel her throwing me off to the right more than the left.
Okay. That's what this little moment is showing too.
Yeah.
And so the way your body is kind of unconsciously dealing with it is this heel comes up, which tells me you're gripping with that left leg,
Yeah.
right? So if you look down at your own thigh bones while you're riding, if your
Yeah.
thigh bones aren't symmetrical, that's us succumbing to the upward force of the rotation issue,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or if you kind of compare one leg to the other, the tight leg might feel tighter. It might feel like it's working harder. It might feel shorter. It might just feel shorter than the other leg. Like I need to take this stirrup down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what I do is adjust because it's not necessarily us, although we can have the same issues. But in her case, as she's learning to stabilize her back and pelvis, she'll put you a little bit right or left. That's part of the instability that she's struggling with.
Yeah.
So what I would do is, because she's such a wide horse, don't even try to use your legs. Just take your center, and you have the middle of the saddle that's made for us, but then
Yeah.
under the saddle, we have a left and right bar on the tree.
Yeah.
And so on a horse like her, and you're not a super tall person, so it's like you're going to have to actually pick up your middle and straddle the right bar, the
Yeah.
center, or the left
To
bar,
the left. Okay.
right? So you're going to use, like I have to, I'm not very tall. And when I ride big or wide horses, I have to literally pick my body up. And I'm
Yeah.
notorious for riding on one side of the saddle because that's where my weight needs to be for that horse.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
So,
otherwise, you've got a tendency to lean over that way rather than move over that way.
yes. And what you'll feel is the relief to your leg use,
Yeah.
right? Because there's no way you can sort of resist with your upper thigh on. And first of all, even if you got a little more over your upper thigh, she's so wide that it would be really difficult to sort of just use muscular resistance from the center of the saddle.
Yeah.
You're going to have to pick your body up, and it's not a huge movement. It kind of feels huge, but it's really, I don't know, less than an inch, but it feels massive. So if you feel her putting you off to the right, you're going to center your
Yeah.
body towards the left bar of the saddle rather than the center of the saddle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that will just help with her stability. It's not her main issue, but it will help as she goes into lengthening her top line. That will be a huge part of helping her stabilize.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I absolutely love how you use the reins in all your videos. You're not hanging in her mouth. You're not trying to collect her through the neck. That's wonderful. What you do want to do is, when you're riding, her new, it'll be a challenge, but you'll get the most benefit working almost constantly on turns and circles.
Okay.
Now, you have a little tendency to turn your head to look where you're going.
Yeah.
You do it in the later videos, which I found interesting.
I think what I've done was this I videoed with you in mind, that watching your videos, and then the other videos I videoed what I would normally do, how I would not, if I wasn't trying to follow your work.
Got it. So in this, like even here, you're doing a really good job watching the pole. And that is the key. What always creates more engagement of the hindquarters is if the horse's spine is straight and level. That's your alignment and your rotation functions of the spine during the turn. Then she's going to figure out how to adduct and abduct all four legs. So the legs, the oblique muscles start working, right? Which she might be a little tight there. And because you get an increased adduction and abduction of particularly the hind legs on every straight and level turn,
Yeah.
that's what promotes more engagement and rotation of the pelvis. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
So the turn is encouraging more engagement. Your job is to keep the neck, the pole, dead center to your seat bones during the turn,
Yeah.
and maybe have to pick up your body a little bit left and right to keep the back
Yeah.
level during the turn.
Okay. Makes
And
sense.
and that will help her stay, like right now, I would just be happy even if she's a little on the forehand, being long and low,
Yeah.
because she's a classic example of when she's shortening her neck or on the long reins over curling the neck, it's because she has so much excessive weight on the front legs that she can't be stable.
Yeah.
So if she could be stable in a consistent long and low posture, it's still too much weight on the front legs, but less than what she's currently dealing with,
Yeah.
right? And you get the muscular benefit, getting her out of the shortening contractions through her whole top line. And that will have a relaxing effect. It works physiologically as well. She will slow down. And so
It's
under
just
saddle,
then
yeah,
that
just there
just
was,
what she, yeah.
that was exactly. So here she's starting to slow down.
Yeah.
This is where the weight of the rider could really help her more than the groundwork. So
Yeah.
like right there, I want to see if I can get a little bit more of a side view. Dang it, she picks her neck up.
I know.
But right there with the nose in the dirt is
Yeah.
where you have that authentic, complete release, lengthening of all the top line muscles. The only reason that's important, and every horse has their head and neck at a slightly different version of long and low when they find that authentic release, sort of lengthening or release. The reason we're looking for that is because that tells us that the spine is no longer in a downward direction of force.
Okay. Yeah.
So once we have completely eliminated any little sneaky version of the back pushing down, the dynamic result of that change of force through the spine is what I call an authentic lengthening. And she needs her nose in the dirt to really get there
Yeah.
for now,
Yeah.
right?
For now.
For now. And
Yeah.
so that's what I would look for. And as soon as she kind of shortens her neck again, that would be the moment I would begin to tighten or ask for a turn,
Right. Yeah.
right? Because as
Yeah.
soon as she shortens her neck, she tells you, I fell too far forward, lost my hind legs.
Yeah.
So with the neck straight and the back level during a turn, you're helping her regain a better placement of the hind leg and begin her own braking. And then she can stay in a long, low posture.
Yeah. I get it. So just as she come up, then turn her to the left.
Yes. So it can be left, right
All
randomly.
right.
It
Yeah.
could be a circle. You might find yourself on a very small turn over and over. She may not turn easily, but I would turn as much as you could with the neck straight.
Yeah.
So if she doesn't follow the rein or your seat easily, navigate it. It certainly doesn't need to be a precise path of travel,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And if she stops with her neck short, then I would ask for forward, not
Yeah.
in a hurry, but put in the request sooner than later,
Yeah.
and maybe ask for forward and a turn. And the same
Yeah.
thing on the downwards, ask for the downward on a turn.
Yeah.
So when you go through this tight corner in all your videos, that's where she actually comes out of that corner pretty good, almost
Okay.
consistently with whatever you're doing. Then on the straightaway, she's kind of up, down,
Yeah.
right? And then the upward transition in the trot is like what we saw on the lunge line,
On the lunge. Yeah.
right? And under saddle, oops, hang on, I want to pause that moment. Um, Under saddle, she has a harder time getting to long and low at the trot than she did without the rider,
Yeah.
right? So she stays in extension a little longer. So there's the moment. Okay, this is what you want to watch in your body. And we are
Yeah.
so hammered into looking where we're going. When you go to trot, everything happens faster. So I would keep watching the pole.
Yeah.
And you have a big safe enclosed area. Where's she going to go? So
Yeah.
yeah. But when you look where you're going, you see how it throws your body weight a little off to one side.
Straight away when you stop that there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then she's sort of counterbalancing that by almost
Yeah.
going the opposite way, or
Yeah.
she's doing that and you're counterbalancing.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to really get the sense of level and straight, that you keep your eyes on the pole, especially at trot.
Yeah.
And then you're making your turn sort of like, it almost feels like a short straight line and a pivot, and a short straight line and a pivot, so that
Yeah.
your turns feel more like a very forward moving turn on the haunches.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And that feeling of like a forward moving turn on the haunches is the straight on the turn that gives you more engagement.
Okay.
And she'll be a little wobbly, and she might go like slow enough to be in a cloud of turtle dust, but she will start to figure out how to brake, which is also how she's going to control her own body weight in
Yeah.
forward motion.
Yeah.
So right now, if she's a little bit more on the slow side or stopping a lot, I would be patient with that with her.
Okay.
I would
Yeah.
still ask for forward. I wouldn't take a coffee break, especially if her head is up, but
Yeah.
I would be very patient. I wouldn't use a lot of leg on her. I would really let her choose her speed. And whenever she wants to break gait, I would allow it for a brief moment and then go forward again
Okay. Yeah.
under saddle.
Yeah.
Because anytime they choose the downward transition from trot to walk or walk to halt, they're going to kind of organize their body a little better than if we're asking for it. So
Yeah.
you're just taking advantage of any choice she has to slow down or make a downward transition.
Yeah. To just ask for the trot and let her come back
Hmm.
when she wants to. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're asking for trot, once she's in trot, my legs would be neutral.
Yeah.
Yep. And then if she breaks trot, I would actually really work on straight and level during the downward transition,
Yeah.
right? And see if she couldn't find a little bit more coordination in the braking. Those are your downward transitions. The pushing is the upward transition.
Yeah.
So I would ease her into the upward, and I would let her choose the downward, even if it's only 2 strides, and you're repeating that over and over and over. Every downward transition, she's working on strengthening the braking mechanism.
Break in. Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
And if she can make her downwards and stay in long and low during turns and circles, now you're really building the braking capacity, the braking
Yeah.
mechanism. So yeah, all of this is pretty good. And I just like here where she shortens her neck, you happen to be coming into a turn, but that would be the moment I would start to turn and maybe think even spiral in on the turn until she tries long and low,
Yeah. Okay.
right? And then as soon
Yeah.
as she picks up her neck, and what you might find is once she's in long and low, you can come off your spiral, go straight, and you'll see how many strides can she go straight in long and low. And
Yeah.
it might only be 5 strides. And then you're
Yeah.
sort of, she shortens her neck and you can begin a spiral in on the other direction.
Yeah.
And what that will show you is every horse has sort of a specific, I don't know, circumference or angle of the turn or the circle where they can keep the hind legs underneath them. And that would be where you get your maximum benefit out of the ride
Okay. So
is,
when if I just I've done sessions where I've just let her go wherever she wants to go, and her go to would be a very small left circle.
play with that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So the reason that might be happening is her torso is tilted forward to the
Yeah.
left.
Yeah.
So usually the bones and the body weight are sort of pulling the body in a
Yeah.
direction that we're
Yeah.
fighting. And the opposite side of her body will be where the tight muscles are.
Yeah.
So one thing you could play with is letting her fall on a small left circle while you keep her level and keep the neck straight.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's sort of just going into the problem. A lot of times the reason they do that is if they're overloaded on the left front, they
Yeah.
fall left like that because the left front leg is moving towards the midline rather than reaching away from the midline, which would be a proper leg use on that turn.
Yeah.
So if they're adducting the left front leg, that's what we call falling on the shoulder or falling in. But
Yeah.
that front leg is going the wrong direction because it's overloaded, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you're going to end up probably using a lot of outside rein to keep the neck straight while she falls left.
Yeah.
And she'll
Yeah.
kind of
Okay. Yeah.
turn and turn and turn. And then all of a sudden, you'll feel her reach with her left front leg in the new
Okay.
direction.
Okay.
And if she gets too fast or too worried, then I would steer
Yeah.
because as soon as she's like here, as you're using more and more of the arena, she's more often in the wrong posture if we look at it
Yeah.
percentage wise.
Yeah.
So the first thing I look for is change the posture because that changes everything.
Yeah.
So you're asking her the question every ride. If I let you go where you want, do you stay in long and low? If the answer is no, then you know she needs steering to help her,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? If you
Yeah.
try steering and you lose the long and low, then you go, okay, I don't have to steer so accurately, or maybe not at all, or maybe only a little here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would still kind of all of your sessions play a bit between walk and trot. And it may be the trot work on the ground is where she can have a greater percentage of time out of extension in long and low.
Yeah.
And it may be when you ride her, it's at the walk.
Yeah.
And so that's perfectly fine. You don't have to do an even amount of walk and trot, or even as you're trying to just say, don't go back in that posture. Like the number one thing for me is get the horse out of a downward force through the spine because that
Yeah.
has so many negative side effects. You're just, you're perpetually struggling with issues as long as they're in that posture.
Yeah.
Long and low is the next easiest posture to get into, even though it's not balance. And it starts to reverse some of those long-term habits related to extension. So I
Yeah.
go any place you can cultivate more strides in long and low is going to serve both of you. And so if that's
Yeah.
more trot, do more trot. If that's more walk, do more walk. If it's more trot on the ground, uh, then do that. And maybe it doesn't work so well under saddle yet. But right now, my main emphasis would be get the posture to change until she can stabilize in the posture of long and low. So
Yeah.
you don't get the up, down, up, down, up, down. I
Yeah.
suspect you're going to need a lot of straight on a turn to help her do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I that's why I'm thinking the long reins as a groundwork exercise, and then I might only use a quarter or half of this massive arena or school, as you call it, to work with her in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that the Brits call it a school. It is really what it is. I love the school.
We
Yeah.
there's a lot of things you call barns and we call yards and
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
And I think the transitions are a bit challenging for her. So I might play between walk trot transitions. And this halt is pretty good where you're taking a little break and letting her think.
Yeah.
But you have a lovely relationship with Queenie. Like she's definitely Queenie. Like she kind of lets you know. She's
Yeah.
kind as kind can be, but she's very quick to sort of let you know what works, what doesn't.
Yeah.
And so with the mares, I find them particularly that way. And so I'm on a constant sort of conversation with a mare. Is this working for you today, darling? Oh, not so much. Let's try a different strategy, right?
Yeah.
So be really willing to kind of flow in and out of your what you're actually doing in your ride, because the doing is really just to facilitate more stability in the posture of long and low.
Yeah.
And braking, slowing down, controlling her body weight through the braking mechanism is her primary issue. So don't be too quick to correct her if she's slow or if she is stopping frequently. Just
Okay.
be gentle with those corrections, because her first early attempts at using her braking mechanism, she's going to overshoot the mark. She's not going to have great control over it.
No. Yeah. So,
So
but
then
really, I kind of am I wanting that to happen in some respect for her to really slow down? Is that would that be a good thing?
for her to,
Want to slow down
yes,
and stop and stuff.
yes, what you'll feel, because when they've been chronically in extension, you get a lot of, like I said, hyperrotation is the side effect. So
Yeah.
what you feel in the saddle is a lot of instability. Like you're doing a really good job keeping yourself stable, but it's not easy. If you look at your center, if you think of your pelvis full of water, she
Yeah.
sloshes you around a lot. Like
Yeah.
that sort of sloshing of the rider's pelvis is the effect of hyperrotation and
Yeah.
extension. So, what you're going to feel when she slows down, and this is the thing to look for, is that she feels more stable. That you're not working so hard to resist all of that shaking in the saddle.
Yeah.
It starts to feel easier for you to keep your center quietly stable. That you're not
Yeah.
overusing your legs or your arms, or you're not having to work so hard with your back and your core to just
Yeah.
stay level and stable. So now this is the last video, and you said this was how you would normally ride her.
Yes. I
Okay.
think so. This was actually
And this was a different day.
after
This
I.
was after the long reins, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a different day. And what it started to look like to me in this video is that your seat gets less and less stable. And I was sort of wondering if you were pushing for more forward, if you were
Uh,
driving a little bit with your seat,
yeah.
because when you weren't asking for a change in speed on the first riding video, your seat was, it's hard to get your seat stable, but it was more stable in the first video. And as I go through this last video, towards the end of it, it's like your pelvis is sort of really rocking. And I didn't know if you were trying to encourage more forward or if she was getting less stable.
I think what it was, I think I had a lesson in between, and the instructor told me to put my seat underneath me a little bit more and plug myself in. So whether that made my seat more my pal, made me more feeling her motion and actually going instead of stabilizing myself, just going with her, that could be what happened.
Yeah, because actually, now that you mention it in this video, you do look more over your inner thigh, like I was asking you to find from the
Yeah.
first video. And
Yeah.
so, what you might, and I always tell people, think of your pelvis full of water, because it's like trying to describe to people how to get their sea legs.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we get our sea legs? It's such a hard sensation to describe because we're stable, but we're moving all the time.
Yeah.
And what you may find in this position is that you use your back and your core muscles a little differently than when you're back on your glutes,
Yeah.
right? And so, and you might actually be working the glutes harder in this more vertical alignment.
Yeah.
So you're still, there must be some unlevelness, because when I see the rider's heel come up like that,
Yeah.
it usually indicates the gripping of the leg.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of gripping through the legs, which is the result of the center not being stable.
Yeah.
And I really saw in this video the head disconnect a lot more than the first video.
Yeah. That's what happens when you have lessons
Oh, I know.
with
Yeah, we've all been there.
people that tell you to look where you're going.
Yes. Yes. And think of, even when you hear that instruction and they want to see you turn your head,
Yeah.
try to think of keeping your eyes or your nose over your belly button as you turn your whole body.
Yeah.
And that way, if you look where you're going with your whole body and you're more vertical, the horse will actually feel easier to steer.
Yeah.
So this is pretty good. And then the widening of the hands, I wanted to ask you about. Is that so you could kind of see the alignment
I
of the neck better?
I think that that again was listening to other people and wanting to keep the contact. So as she came up, I widened to keep the contact on the bit.
Yeah,
So
yes. And as she's more and more in long and low, that's one way to keep a light connection to the bit, which is
yeah.
just fine. And if you sort of, when you put your hands wide like that, I always look at it like it makes an arrow to the pole,
Yeah.
right? So with your hands wide, you could relax your elbows a little more. They don't have to be quite that wide or forward,
Yeah.
but you'll see the effect in sort of where the neck is lining up between those two reins. And that
Yeah.
might help you visually with keeping the neck more stable in a straight alignment,
Yeah.
but you'll have to really look at it to do that. So there
Yeah.
on the turn, that's where she doesn't quite engage. And so she
Yeah.
started to escape through the outside shoulder with a little neck bend. When you
Yeah.
keep the neck straight, they can't do that.
Can't do that. Yeah.
Because it's really the alignment of the lower neck to your seat bones that controls the shoulders.
Yeah.
So, but this is good. And this, whatever you did with the other instructor, it did put you a little more up over your thighs, which is what I was
Yeah.
talking about in the first video.
Yeah.
So that's quite good. And are you like sort of encouraging more forward energy?
I think I must have been. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and she's
Yeah. Because
actually, that change in your body could be helping her feel a little more confident about letting go of her neck, because she
yeah.
does better in this video than even the first video.
Yeah.
And you're also, the more you're turning, the better she does. As
Yeah.
she comes through the tightest parts of the turn, that's where she sort of really finds enough engagement that she can have a deeper release through the top line. She can't
Yeah.
hold it very long, and that's where
No.
the transitions will play. That will help her. Every transition, she'll kind of learn a little more,
Yeah.
breaking, pushing. But yeah, any questions?
Oh, there's been so much information.
I know. Well, you sent me so much to work with. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be feeding her with a shovel.
So let's just get this. So we need her more down more often, nose down to the ground more constantly. Um, and to help her with that, circles and turning. And
Yes.
then the transitions from walk to trot, let ask for the trot, let her come down to the walk when she wants to, and then ask for the trot again.
Yes. The downward transitions and slowing her speed,
Yeah.
those the braking mechanism that controls her body weight, slowing, and downward transitions, it's the same deal. It's all the
Okay.
same thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's why the turning will help with the adduction, abduction of all four legs. So that will help with more engagement of the hind legs and more reaching, opening of the front legs. But
Yeah.
she
Okay.
absolutely has to have the neck dead straight to your seat bones, and she has to be
Yeah.
level during the turn in order to get that benefit.
Yeah.
So I would put, steering, no steering, you can experiment.
Yeah.
Walk, trot, halt, transitions, you can experiment.
Yeah.
But definitely, and even if you had a smaller school to work in, then you maybe could be more of a bit of a passenger, not have to steer. But in a big school like this, I would kind of confine yourself to half or less
Yeah.
of the
Okay.
area.
Sense. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I, yeah. The problem, we got a little round pen there, but the problem with that is quite deep. It's sand and it's quite a deep sandy. So, and I think she would struggle in there, to be fair.
Yeah. And you're
Yeah.
getting it done in the big arena. So,
Yeah.
and you really, even whether her head is up or down, I see very little rein use to get your turns. So she's following your seat pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. To be fair. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
No.
think, like just there, increase the turn, there, try to go straight a little bit. That
Yeah.
fast. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just change your direction with every change in her neck use.
Yeah. I think we try and follow school patterns,
Yes,
and yeah, so I got to get my head out of, I don't have to follow the school pattern at
e-
this precise moment.
exactly. And that's kind of where a lot of people have the hard time wrapping their head around the way I teach is it's a very deep thought that we have, like a ingrained thought that if we do our school patterns long enough, balance will be the result.
Yeah.
And you just don't see that happening, or at
No.
least not happening often enough.
No.
So I sort of just turned it around and said the pattern is the result of the posture change,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
once you find the path of least resistance into just the first step is you don't need to be in extension anymore, darling. We don't do
Yeah.
that. Yeah, we just don't need to do that anymore. She'll be unstable at first. It'll take a little while in the posture of long and low for her to really stabilize, walk, trot, halt, and steering. So
Yeah.
give her the time.
Yeah.
When that gets easy, then you'll play more with the pushing and braking elements to start flexing the back higher
Yeah.
and you can do it with or without a rein contact. I think the little bit of rein contact you're doing by widening your hands may be helping her stay in long and low.
Okay. Yeah.
When you're on a looser rein, she's a little bit more up and down
Yeah.
because I think that light rein contact may be just helping her stabilize without having to shorten her top line.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you can play with that too. You're not holding her up. You've just got that light connection
Yeah.
where she's a little more keen to stay in long and low when you have that little bit better connection on the reins.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yep. So in a nutshell, more engagement, more braking, and the
Yeah.
neck the neck lengthening tells you that she's straight and level.
Yeah.
But as soon as they're straight and level, they all fall forward.
Yeah.
So then with the long neck, the turns, circles, and transitions are the elements we play with to increase engagement and lift the back.
Perfect.
Yeah. So you can be very creative with how you play with those elements.
Lovely.
Yeah. But no, this is good. This is very good. I was really impressed with everything you sent. I was like, wow, that's so much of what I usually have to tell people to do.
I so my job, I send out joint supplements, and I wrap and pack them and send them out. And as I'm doing it, I watch your videos on
Oh,
YouTube.
excellent.
So
Excellent. Yeah, that's
yeah,
that's what I do when I'm doing yard work or something. I'll have YouTube playing as something I can listen to, or if I'm doing something mundane, then I will watch YouTube videos. It's a great time
yeah,
to do it.
yeah, yeah, and all your podcasts and everything. So
Oh,
uh,
good.
yeah, I very thoroughly enjoy them.
Well, I will be really curious to see how you've got a lot of, all I felt like I gave you today was more of a targeted approach to your
Yeah,
unique course,
yeah,
but you've really got all of the skills in place that the
yeah,
targeted approach, let me stop the share here, by sort of targeting what the horse needs and just that tiny little change in your posture when you ride, I
yeah.
think you're going to see big changes very quickly.
Brilliant. That's what I want to hear, and that's what I want.
Excellent.
So I knew the what you do, I know helps the horse, but I didn't know what I needed to do to help my horse particularly. So this lesson, we've done that, and
Yes.
that's where onward and upwards. So
Excellent.
now what happens next is
Let me stop the recording and
okay.
then hang on a second.